You may not always see it, you may not always feel it, but let me remind you today, God's plan for your life is always in motion. From the moment you took your first breath, He set things in motion to bring you into your purpose. Every step you take, every season you walk through, even the difficult moments, they are all woven into His divine plan. Sometimes, life can feel like a puzzle with missing pieces. You look around and wonder, God, what are you doing? Why am I facing this challenge? Why do I feel stuck? But what you have to remember is that God doesn't show us the full picture all at once. He reveals things step by step in His perfect timing. Just because you don't see the whole plan doesn't mean there isn't one. Think about the story of Joseph. He had a dream of greatness, a vision of what his future would be. But before he ever saw the fulfillment of that promise, he was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. If you had met Joseph in the middle of his journey, you might have thought, there's no way this man is walking in God's plan. But what looked like a series of hardships was actually positioning him for his destiny. Every setback was a setup. Every disappointment was preparing him for what was coming. That's how God works. He uses every situation, the good, the bad, and the unexpected, to move you toward the place He has prepared for you. You may be facing uncertainty right now, but don't mistake silence for absence. God is not distant. He's orchestrating things behind the scenes. He's moving people, shifting circumstances, aligning opportunities, and preparing you for something greater than you can imagine. Think about a builder working on a house. The foundation is laid first, but if you were to walk by during the early stages of construction, it wouldn't look like much. There might be piles of wood, exposed wiring, and unfinished walls. If you didn't know better, you might think, this doesn't look like a home. But the builder isn't finished yet. He has a blueprint. He knows how the final structure is supposed to look. That's exactly what God is doing in your life. He's building something, shaping something, constructing a future that is beyond your imagination. But here's the key. You have to trust the process. You have to trust that even when things look unfinished, even when it seems like nothing is happening, God is still at work. Just because you don't see immediate results doesn't mean progress isn't being made. Maybe you've been praying for a breakthrough, believing for a door to open, waiting for an answer, but nothing seems to be changing. You're tempted to get discouraged, to think that maybe God has forgotten about you. But can I tell you, delay does not mean denial. Just because it's taking longer than you expected doesn't mean God isn't going to do it. Sometimes He's working on things that you can't see. He's putting the right people in place, preparing the right opportunities, and making sure everything is in alignment for your blessing. Look at how nature works. A seed is planted in the ground, and for a long time it looks like nothing is happening. You don't see movement. You don't see growth. But beneath the soil, roots are forming, strength is being built. Then at the right time, what was hidden beneath the surface begins to sprout. That's how God works in your life. You may not see the progress right away, but that doesn't mean nothing is happening. Your roots are growing deeper, your foundation is getting stronger, and at the right time, God will bring forth what He's been preparing all along. It's easy to trust God when things are going smoothly, when prayers are answered quickly, when doors open without resistance. But true faith is trusting Him even when you don't understand, even when you don't have all the answers, even when things seem to be standing still. Faith says, God, I don't see it yet, but I trust that You're working. I trust that You're leading me. I trust that You have a plan that is greater than anything I could ever imagine. And here's the incredible thing. When you walk in faith, when you choose to believe that God is always working, you position yourself to receive His best. You stop worrying about how things will come together, and you start resting in the assurance that He's already figured it out. You don't have to strive, force things to happen, or live in anxiety. You can walk in peace, knowing that your steps are ordered, Your future's secure, and God's plan is unfolding exactly as it should. We all have dreams, desires, and prayers we're believing God for. We're trusting for breakthroughs, opportunities, healing, restoration. But what happens when it doesn't come in our timing? What do we do when we've been faithful, we prayed, we believed, but it seems like nothing is changing? It's easy to get discouraged, to wonder if God has forgotten about us, to question whether what we're hoping for will ever come to pass. But here's what you have to understand. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it's not going to happen. A delay is not a denial. God has an appointed time for everything in your life. He knows when you're ready, when the circumstances are right, and when everything is aligned for His perfect will. You may think you're ready now, you may feel like it should have happened already, but God sees the bigger picture. He knows what's ahead. He knows what still needs to be put in place. He's not withholding the blessing. He's preparing you for it. Think about a child who wants to drive. He may be eager, excited, convinced that he's ready, but if he gets behind the wheel too soon, he could put himself in danger. A loving parent wouldn't hand over the keys before the child is ready, not to punish him, but to protect him. In the same way, God won't give you something before the right time. It's not because He's saying no, it's because He's saying, I love you too much to let you have something you're not prepared for. Sometimes what we think is a delay is actually God's way of refining us. He's working on our character, strengthening our faith, teaching us patience. If He gave us everything we asked for the moment we asked for it, we wouldn't develop the endurance, the wisdom, or the strength we need to handle the blessing. The waiting season isn't wasted time, it's training time. It's where God stretches us, molds us, and prepares us for what's coming. Look at the life of David. He was anointed to be king as a young shepherd boy. He had the promise, he had the calling, but he didn't step into the throne overnight. There were years of waiting, years of challenges, years where it looked like the promise might never come to pass. He was on the run from Saul, hiding in caves, facing obstacles that seemed unfair. But in that season of waiting, God was developing him, strengthening his leadership, preparing him for the responsibility ahead. When the time was right, David stepped into his destiny, not a moment too soon, not a moment too late, but at the exact appointed time. Maybe you're in a season where you feel stuck. You see others moving forward, doors opening for people around you, but you're still waiting. You've been faithful, you've done your best, but the opportunity hasn't come yet. Instead of getting discouraged, recognize that God is still at work. He's positioning you, maturing you, setting things in motion that you can't even see. A delay doesn't mean your blessing is denied. It just means God is working behind the scenes, making sure everything is in place. He's aligning the right people, shifting circumstances, preparing you for what's ahead. If He brought it too soon, it wouldn't be as great as it's meant to be. The right door, the right opportunity, the right relationship, when it comes in God's timing, it will be bigger, better, and more fulfilling than anything you could have arranged on your own. When a seed is planted in the ground, you don't see anything happening at first. There's no sign of growth, no evidence that anything is changing. But beneath the surface, the seed is taking root. The foundation is being established. It may take weeks or months before you see the first sprout, but that doesn't mean the seed wasn't growing all along. That's what God is doing in your life. You may not see the progress, but He's working beneath the surface, developing what He promised you. Too often we get impatient in the waiting. We try to make things happen in our own strength, force opportunities, or settle for something less than what God has for us. But when we try to rush the process, we step outside of His perfect plan. The best thing you can do is trust that if it hasn't happened yet, it's because God's timing is still at work. Think about Sarah and Abraham. God promised them a child, but years went by with no sign of the promise. Sarah grew impatient, and she took matters into her own hands, arranging for Abraham to have a child through Hagar. But that wasn't God's best. It caused complications, heartache, and struggles that could have been avoided. When God finally fulfilled His promise, Sarah gave birth to Isaac, the child of the promise, in the perfect timing of God. If only she had waited, she wouldn't have had to go through unnecessary difficulties. That's a lesson for all of us. When we try to force something to happen before it's time, we only create frustration and disappointment. But when we trust that God's timing is perfect, we can rest, knowing that He is faithful to fulfill what He has promised. There are times in life when we pray, believe, and do everything we know how to do, but the door still closes. The opportunity doesn't work out. The job offer falls through, the relationship ends, or the business deal goes in a different direction. In those moments, it's easy to feel discouraged, to wonder if we missed something, or to question why things didn't go the way we planned. But what we have to understand is that a closed door is not the end of the road. It's often a sign that God is leading us to something better. God sees the full picture. He knows what's best for you. What looks like rejection is often protection. What feels like a loss is really a setup for something greater. You may have had your heart set on that promotion, on that opportunity, on that relationship, but when the door closed, it wasn't because God was withholding something from you. It was because He had something in store that you couldn't see yet. Think about a child who wants candy before dinner. He might cry, get upset, and not understand why his parent says no. But the parent isn't being mean. They know that there's something better coming, a healthy meal that will nourish him. In the same way, God sometimes says no to something we think we need because He has something better prepared. We might not understand in the moment, but if we trust Him, we'll see that His plan is always for our good. Look at the story of Moses. He was raised in Pharaoh's palace with access to wealth, influence, and power. From a human perspective, it looked like he had everything going for him. But God had a different plan. When Moses killed the Egyptian and had to flee to the wilderness, it seemed like his life had taken a turn for the worse. He went from living in luxury to tending sheep in the desert. But what looked like a closed door was actually God positioning him for his true assignment. If Moses had stayed in Egypt under Pharaoh's rule, he would have never led the Israelites to freedom. What seemed like a setback was actually a divine setup. Maybe you had a relationship that didn't work out. You thought it was the right person, you invested time and energy, but things fell apart. Instead of seeing it as a failure, recognize that God is directing you. He knows the kind of person who will complement your destiny. He knows who will love you, support you, and walk with you into the future. He is prepared. Sometimes He closes a door to protect you from settling for less than His best. Think about how God led the Israelites out of Egypt. They were on their way to the Promised Land, but when they arrived at the Red Sea, it looked like the way forward was blocked. Pharaoh's army was behind them. The water was in front of them, and in the natural, it seemed like there was no way out. But what looked like a closed door was actually an opportunity for God to do something miraculous. He didn't take them back to Egypt. He didn't let them be defeated. He opened up the Red Sea and made a way where there was no way. That's what God does in our lives. When one door closes, He doesn't leave us stuck. He's already preparing the next step. The key is to not get discouraged in the waiting. Too often, when something doesn't go our way, we let disappointment settle in. We start thinking, maybe I'll never get another opportunity. Maybe this is as good as it gets. But God never takes something away without the intention of replacing it with something better. A closed door can also be a sign that you've meant to take a different direction. Maybe you've been pursuing a certain career path, but every attempt seems to hit a dead end. Instead of feeling defeated, step back and ask God, what are you trying to show me? Is there something greater you have in store? Sometimes we get so focused on one plan, one idea, one vision, that we don't realize God is trying to lead us to something even greater. Look at how Jesus operated. When He came to His hometown, the people didn't believe in Him. They rejected him. They questioned his authority. And because of their unbelief, he couldn't perform many miracles there. It was a closed door. But Jesus didn't get discouraged. He moved on to other towns where people were hungry for his message, where miracles could take place, where lives would be changed. If one place rejected him, he didn't stop. He kept moving forward to where the opportunity was waiting. That's how we have to approach life. When something doesn't work out, when the door doesn't open, don't stay stuck in disappointment. Don't waste time trying to force something that isn't meant to be. Trust that God has already gone ahead of you, that He's preparing the right opportunities, the right relationships, the right breakthroughs. Just because one door closed doesn't mean the journey is over. It simply means you're being redirected to something greater. Life has a way of bringing seasons of uncertainty, times when we don't know what's next, when things aren't going as planned, when the future feels unclear. Maybe you're facing a career change, navigating a difficult relationship, or waiting on a breakthrough that seems far away. In those moments, it's easy to feel anxious, to let worry take over, to wonder if things will ever fall into place. But one of the greatest signs that God is shaping your future is the peace He gives you, even when you don't have all the answers. This peace is not something that comes from circumstances lining up perfectly. It's not the kind of peace the world gives where everything has to make sense before you can feel at ease. No, this is a supernatural peace, a peace that doesn't always make sense. It's the kind of peace that lets you lay your head down at night even when things are uncertain. It's the peace that keeps you steady when everything around you is shifting. It's the quiet confidence that says, I don't know how this will work out, but I trust that God is in control. Think about Peter walking on the water. As long as he kept his eyes on Jesus, he was steady. The waves were crashing, the wind was howling, but he had peace in the middle of the storm. The moment he took his eyes off Jesus and focused on the storm, that's when he started to sink. That's a picture of what happens when we let worry take over. The storm may be raging around us, but if we keep our eyes on God, we can walk through uncertainty with confidence. Maybe you're waiting on a decision, hoping for a door to open, needing direction for what's next. The enemy will try to get you to panic, to fill your mind with fear, to convince you that you need to figure everything out right now. But God is saying, be still and know that I am God. When you rest in Him, when you stop striving and start trusting, that's when His peace takes over. There's a reason why Jesus is called the Prince of Peace. When He's in control of your life, He doesn't just give you peace when things are easy. He gives you peace in the middle of uncertainty. Think about when the disciples were in the boat and a great storm arose. The wind was howling, the waves were crashing, and they thought they were going to die. But where was Jesus? He was asleep in the boat. He wasn't worried about the storm because He knew who was in control. That's the kind of peace God wants you to have, the kind where even when things look uncertain, you can rest knowing that He's got you in the palm of His hand. He's not pacing back and forth in heaven trying to figure out how things will work out. He's already made a way. He's already lined up the right opportunities. He's already gone before you and set things in motion. Sometimes the greatest confirmation that you're on the right path isn't that everything is easy, it's that you have peace in the middle of uncertainty. The situation may not have changed yet, but something inside you just knows God is working this out. That's a sign that He's guiding you. Look at Daniel in the lion's den. He should have been terrified, he should have been restless, he should have been trying to find a way out, but instead he had peace. He knew that the same God who had been with him before would be with him in that moment. That's what happens when you trust in God's plan. You don't have to live stressed, worried, or anxious. You can walk in peace, even when you don't have all the answers. This peace is something the world can't give you. It doesn't come from a perfect job, the right house, or having all the money in the bank. Those things can disappear. But when your peace comes from knowing who holds your future, nothing can take it away. You could lose the job, the deal could fall through, the plans could change, but because your peace isn't tied to those things, you don't fall apart. You stay steady, knowing that God is still in control. Sometimes we think we need all the details before we can be at peace. We want to know exactly how things will unfold, when the breakthrough will come, how the situation will resolve. But faith is about trusting even when you don't see the full picture. If you had all the answers, there would be no need for faith. Peace isn't found in knowing every detail. It's found in knowing that God already has every detail worked out. Think about a GPS. When you put in your destination, you don't see the whole route at once. The GPS doesn't tell you every turn from the beginning. It gives you directions step by step. As long as you follow each instruction as it comes, you'll get where you need to go. That's how God leads us. He may not show us the entire journey all at once, but He gives us enough light for the next step. The key is to trust Him, to follow His lead, and to walk in peace, knowing that He's guiding you exactly where you need to be. One of the ways you can recognize that God is shaping your future is through the people He brings into your life. At just the right time, in just the right way, He places the right connections, the right opportunities, and the right relationships in your path. These are not coincidences, they are divine appointments. When you look back over your life, you can probably think of moments when one meeting, one conversation, or one introduction changed everything. That wasn't random. That was God's hand guiding you, positioning you for what He had prepared. Sometimes we get so focused on our plans, on how we think things should happen, that we don't realize God has something better in store. We're looking for one opportunity, but God has something greater. We're expecting the breakthrough to come from a certain direction, but God brings it another way. That's why it's so important to stay open to His leading, to trust that He knows how to connect the right people at the right time. Think about Ruth. She was a widow living in a foreign land with no clear direction for her future. It looked like everything had fallen apart. But even in the middle of her uncertainty, God was orchestrating divine connections. She happened to go work in the fields of Boaz, a man who would not only provide for her, but eventually become her husband and redeem her family's future. That wasn't a coincidence, it was a divine setup. If Ruth had stayed stuck in the past, if she had let disappointment keep her from stepping forward, she would have missed the blessing that was waiting for her. That's how God works. He places people in our lives who help us step into our destiny. He arranges encounters that we couldn't have planned for ourselves. You may be wondering how your dreams will come to pass, how the doors will open, how the right opportunities will show up. But you don't have to figure it all out on your own. God already has the right people lined up to help you, to favor you, to push you forward. Joseph experienced this in his journey. He was sold into slavery by his brothers, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. It looked like everything was against him, but even in that difficult season, God was setting up divine appointments. In the prison, Joseph met the cupbearer, a man who would later introduce him to Pharaoh. That one connection took him from the prison to the palace in a single day. If Joseph had been discouraged, if he had given up in the waiting, he would have missed the opportunity that God had prepared for him. Maybe you feel like you're in a season where nothing is happening, where the right doors haven't opened yet. But God is not limited by time, by circumstances, or by what seems possible. In one moment, He can bring the right person into your life, the right conversation, the right opportunity that changes everything. You don't have to chase after it, force it, or make it happen in your own strength. Stay faithful where you are, and in the right time, God will cause the right connections to find you. Sometimes divine connections don't look the way we expect. They may come through unexpected people in unexpected places. We have to be careful not to dismiss opportunities just because they don't come in the package we were looking for. The breakthrough you need may be in a relationship you haven't nurtured yet. The opportunity you've been praying for may come through a connection that seems small at first. Think about David. When the prophet Samuel came to anoint the next king, David's own father didn't consider him. He brought out all of David's older brothers, the ones who looked the part, the ones who seemed more qualified, but God had chosen David. He was out in the fields taking care of sheep, overlooked by man, but handpicked by God. The very people who didn't recognize his potential were the ones who had to watch as God elevated him. That's a reminder that God sees you, even when others don't. He knows your name, He knows where you are, and He knows how to bring the right people into your life to take you to the next level. You don't have to force doors open. You don't have to manipulate circumstances to make things happen. Stay faithful, stay in peace, and watch how God brings the right connections at the right time. Some of the greatest blessings in life come through relationships. One conversation can open a new opportunity. One connection can lead to a breakthrough. That's why it's important to be kind, to be open, to be ready. You never know who God may use to bring you into your next season. The person you meet today could be the one God uses to open the door for your future. God is always working behind the scenes. He's putting the right people in place, preparing opportunities, arranging divine appointments. What may seem like an ordinary moment could be a setup for something extraordinary. The key is to trust that He is in control, to walk in expectation, and to know that your steps are ordered by the Lord. You don't have to worry about how it's going to happen. God has already arranged the connections that will take you exactly where you need to be. When you look at your life, when you think about the dreams in your heart, the prayers you've prayed, the things you're believing for, remember that God is shaping your future in ways you may not always see. The delays are not denials. God is working behind the scenes, preparing you, positioning you, and making sure everything is in place for His perfect timing. When a door closes, don't be discouraged. That closed door is leading you to something better, something greater than you could have imagined. Even in seasons of uncertainty, when you don't have all the answers, when the path forward isn't clear, God gives you a peace that surpasses understanding. That peace is a sign that He's in control, that He's guiding your steps, that you don't have to strive or struggle, just trust. And as you continue on this journey, you'll begin to notice the divine connections, the unexpected relationships, the moments that seem small but are actually God's way of leading you into your destiny. You may not see the full picture yet, but know this: God has already written your story. He's already lined up the right opportunities, the right people, and the right breakthroughs. Your job is to keep walking in faith, to trust even when you don't understand, and to believe that the one who began a good work in you will be faithful to complete it. Keep trusting the journey, because God is shaping your future in ways beyond what you could ask, think, or imagine.